Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going deep into the world of psychotherapy. And I know what you're thinking, like, therapy? Yeah. I've heard it all before. But trust me, stick with us because there's way more to this than meets the eye. We're going to be unpacking this really fascinating article from Very Well Mind called Psychotherapy, Definition, Types, Efficacy. And I'm going to really understand what psychotherapy is all about. Get ready for some serious aha moments, you guys.
It really is fascinating, and you're right, it's so much more than just, lying on a couch and spilling your secrets. Psychotherapy is a dynamic process, and honestly, the research on its effectiveness is really compelling.
So let's start with the basics. What exactly is psychotherapy? It's got to be more than just talk therapy, right?
Yeah, it is more than that. It's a really collaborative process between, well, you and a trained professional, right? And the goal is to help you figure out and then change thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are causing you distress, or even interfering with your life in some way. It's about finding what works best for you, not just like some cookie cutter solution for everybody.
Okay, so I like that, a personalized approach. But I mean, there are so many different types of therapy out there, right? It's overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a super common misconception that all therapy is the same. Think of it like a toolbox. You wouldn't use just a hammer for every repair job, right? There's individual therapy, couples, family, even group therapy. It's all tailored to very specific needs and goals.
Okay, so how do you know which tool or therapy is right for you?
Well, it really just depends on what you're hoping to, well, address. For example, if you're struggling with, let's say, social anxiety, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, has been shown to be very effective for that.
I've definitely heard of CBT, but
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what it involves.
So CBT focuses on the relationship between your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Let's say you get invited to a party, but you immediately think to yourself, ugh, I'm going to be so awkward there. People aren't going to like me. That thought triggers anxiety, so you end up declining the invitation. CBT helps you to kind of identify these negative thought patterns and then replace them with more balanced and realistic ones.
So it's about challenging those automatic negative thoughts that can really hold us back. It's like having a personal trainer for your brain.
Exactly. It's giving you the tools to reframe those thoughts and then ultimately change those avoidant behaviors.
That makes a lot of sense. So CBT is all about tackling both those thoughts, A and D behaviors. But
Mhm.
what about therapies that focus more on the past? Like psychoanalytic therapy, I'll admit, that always kind of makes me think of Freud. And diving deep into all your childhood memories.
Psychoanalytic therapy definitely has its roots in Freudian theory, but it's evolved a lot. While it does look at how past experiences shape you now, it's not about blaming your parents for everything. It's more about understanding how unconscious patterns and even conflicts might be influencing your current relationships and behaviors.
Interesting. So it's about uncovering those kind of hidden patterns that might be driving our actions without us even realizing it.
Exactly. And it can be helpful for people who feel stuck in repetitive cycles or, they struggle with deep-seated emotional issues.
Okay, so we've got CBT for tackling negative thoughts and those behaviors, and then psychoanalytic therapy for exploring those deeper unconscious patterns. But there are so many other approaches out there. It's almost like a buffet of therapy options.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, that can be a really good thing. It means there's likely an approach that's going to resonate with you and your individual needs. For instance, humanistic therapy. Humanistic therapy takes a more person-centered approach and focuses on self-acceptance and personal growth. It's about creating a safe and supportive environment where you can really explore your feelings and work towards fulfilling your potential.
So it's like having a cheerleader who believes in you and helps you see your own strengths.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. It's about empowering you to become the best version of yourself.
Okay, we've touched on a few different approaches now, but I'm curious, what sorts of problems can psychotherapy actually HELP with? Is it just for people with diagnosed mental illnesses?
Not at all. Psychotherapy can be helpful for such a wide range of life challenges, from like everyday stress and relationship issues to more serious things like anxiety, depression, even trauma. It's like having a toolkit for your mental and emotional well-being.
So it's really for anyone who's feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or just wants to improve their overall mental health.
Exactly. And it's super important to remember that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness at all. It shows that you're willing to invest in yourself and make positive changes.
You're right, but let's be real for a second. Some people are skeptical of therapy, right?
Hmm.
Does psychotherapy actually work? Or is it just a placebo effect? I know there have been studies that have questioned its effectiveness.
You're right. Early on, there was some debate about that. But more recent research has consistently shown that psychotherapy is effective for a wide range of mental health conditions, especially anxiety and mood disorders.
So it's not just wishful thinking. There's actually like scientific evidence to back it up.
Exactly. For example, there are studies that have shown that CBT is just as effective as medication in treating some types of anxiety and depression, and sometimes it's even more effective in the long term.
Wow, so CBT can actually be just as effective as medication for treating depression. That's huge.
It is. And what's even more amazing is that the benefits of therapy, they often extend beyond just symptom reduction. Research has shown that it can also improve your overall well-being, increase your resilience, strengthen relationships, and enhance your coping skills.
So it's not just about like feeling less anxious or depressed. It's about actually equipping you with the tools to navigate all of life's challenges, but more effectively.
Exactly. It's about empowering you to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
But okay, let's shift gears a bit and address something that I think a lot of people are concerned about: the cost of therapy. We briefly touched on it earlier, but I know it can be a barrier for a lot of people.
You're right, it's a very valid concern. Therapy can be expensive, and unfortunately, not everyone has access to insurance that covers mental health services.
So what options are there for people who are like struggling to afford treatment?
Well, it's important to know that there are definitely resources available. Many therapists offer sliding scale fees based on income, so they adjust their fees to make therapy more accessible. And then there are also community mental health centers that provide services, sometimes at low cost or even no cost.
That's really good to hear. So therapy doesn't have to be like a luxury only accessible to people who have a ton of money.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that investing in your mental health is an investment in your overall well-being. Just like we try to prioritize our physical health, we should try to do the same for our mental and emotional well-being.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of the therapist-client relationship, the role of those specific techniques, and the client's own active engagement, and then all the research that supports just how effective therapy really can be. We also touched on the issue of cost and highlighted some of the resources for people who are struggling to afford treatment.
We have covered a lot of ground. I think it's clear that psychotherapy can be such a powerful tool for personal growth and healing. And while it's not some magic bullet that's going to erase all your problems instantly, it can give you the tools and insights you need to navigate life's challenges, but in a more effective way.
I'm feeling pretty inspired right now, to be honest. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something we haven't addressed yet: couples and family therapy. How do those approaches differ from individual therapy?
That is a great question. And honestly, it's a topic that deserves its own deep dive for sure. Couples and family therapy focus on the dynamics and interactions between individuals within a relationship system.
So instead of focusing on just one person's internal world, it's about understanding how all those individuals relate to and influence each other.
Exactly. The goal is to improve communication, resolve conflicts, and strengthen those relationships. It's about recognizing those unhealthy patterns that might be contributing to problems and developing healthier ways of interacting with each other.
So it's like having a referee who can help mediate disagreements and like facilitate healthy communication.
I like that. That's a really good analogy. A skilled therapist can help couples and families identify their strengths, work through their challenges, and build stronger, more fulfilling relationships. But just like individual therapy, it definitely requires commitment and active participation from everyone involved.
This has been so insightful. We've explored the science behind psychotherapy. We've addressed some of those practical concerns like cost, and even touched on couples and family therapy. I'm honestly feeling even more confident in saying that therapy can be a truly transformative experience for those who are open to it.
I agree. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll leave you with some final thoughts and tips for those of you who might be considering taking that first step towards seeking therapy.
Welcome back to our deep dive into psychotherapy. I'm excited to keep going with this conversation and dive a little deeper into all that fascinating research that supports how effective therapy can be. Yeah, I'm ready to jump in. In the first part, we talked about how therapy can be such a powerful tool for all sorts of challenges, right? But I'm curious, like, what makes therapy work? Is it the specific techniques, or is it the therapist's expertise? Or is it more about the client's willingness to actually change?
That's a great question. And like most things in psychotherapy, the answer is, well, it's kind of nuanced. It's not just one thing. It's really a combination of factors that contribute to successful outcomes. Research suggests that the therapeutic relationship, those specific techniques we mentioned before, and the client's active engagement all play a role.
Okay, so it's a bit like a recipe. You need all the right ingredients in the right proportions. Let's break that down even more. So we talked about the therapist-client relationship being so crucial, right? What makes that relationship so important?
Well, think about it this way. Would you feel comfortable sharing, like, your deepest thoughts and feelings with someone you didn't really trust? Or someone you didn't feel connected to?
Probably not. I wouldn't want to feel judged
Mm.
or like misunderstood.
Exactly. That therapeutic relationship has to be built on trust and empathy and mutual respect. When you feel safe and understood by your therapist, you're way more likely to open up, to explore those difficult emotions and be receptive to their guidance.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like creating a space where you feel comfortable being vulnerable and then actually working through all those challenges.
Exactly. And when that foundation of trust is really strong, it allows the therapist to use those specific techniques like CBT or psychoanalytic therapy in a more effective way.
Okay, so the techniques are important, but they work best when there's already a really strong therapeutic relationship. What about the client's role in all of this? Like, how much does their willingness to actually change impact the success of therapy?
A person's motivation and active engagement are crucial. Therapy isn't passive at all. It requires effort and commitment from the client. Think of it like physical therapy. If you go to a physical therapist for a knee injury, but you don't actually do the exercises that they tell you to do, you're probably not going to see much improvement, right?
So it's not just about showing up for appointments. You actually have to put in the work outside of those sessions too.
Exactly. And that might involve practicing new coping mechanisms, challenging negative thought patterns, even making some changes to your behavior.
So it's definitely a collaborative effort. The therapist kind of providing the tools and the guidance, but the client ultimately has to put those tools into practice in their own life.
Exactly. It's totally a partnership. Now, I know you mentioned being interested in the research, so let's look at some specific findings that show just how effective psychotherapy can be.
Yes, please. I'm all ears.
Okay, so numerous studies have shown that psychotherapy can significantly reduce the symptoms of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. For example, there was a really large-scale study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It found that CBT was just as effective as medication in treating like moderate to severe depression. And in some cases, it was even more effective in preventing relapse.
Wow. So CBT can be just as effective as medication when it comes to treating depression. That's pretty incredible.
It is. And what's even more amazing is that the benefits of therapy, well, they often go beyond just symptom reduction. Research has shown that therapy can also improve overall well-being, increase resilience, strengthen relationships, and enhance coping skills.
So it's not just about feeling like less anxious or depressed.
Right.
It's about getting those tools to help you navigate life's challenges more effectively.
Exactly. It's all about empowering you to create a more fulfilling and meaningful life for yourself. Now, let's change gears a bit and address something that I know is a common concern, the cost of therapy. We touched on this briefly earlier, but I know it can be a real barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. Therapy can be expensive, and not everyone has access to insurance that actually covers mental health services.
Yeah.
So what options are there for people who are struggling to afford treatment?
That's a very valid concern, and it's important to know that there are resources available. Many therapists offer sliding scale fees based on income, which basically means that they adjust their fees to make therapy more accessible. There are also community mental health centers that provide services, and sometimes they offer them at a low cost or even no cost.
Oh, that's great. So therapy doesn't have to be a luxury. It's not just accessible to those who can afford it.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that investing in your mental health is an investment in your overall well-being. Just like we prioritize our physical health, we should be prioritizing our mental and emotional well-being too.
I love that. So we've talked about the importance of that therapist-client relationship and the role of specific techniques and the client's active engagement in their own treatment. And of course, all the research that shows just how effective therapy really can be. We even touched on the issue of cost, and we highlighted some resources for those of you struggling to afford treatment.
You're right. We've covered so much. And I think it's clear that psychotherapy can be a really powerful tool for personal growth and healing. And yeah, while it's not a magic bullet that's going to just instantly erase all your problems, it can give you the tools and insights you need to navigate life's challenges in a more effective way.
I'm honestly feeling super inspired right now. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something we haven't addressed yet. Couples and family therapy. How do those approaches differ from individual therapy?
That is a great question. And to be honest, it's a topic that deserves its own deep dive. But I can tell you that couples and family therapy really focus on the dynamics and interactions between the individuals within a relationship system.
Okay, so instead of focusing on just one person's internal world, it's about understanding how all those individuals relate to and influence each other.
Exactly. The goal with couples and family therapy is to improve communication and then resolve those conflicts and ultimately strengthen those relationships. It's about recognizing those unhealthy patterns that might be contributing to problems and then coming up with healthier ways of interacting with each other.
So it's like having a referee to help mediate disagreements and facilitate, healthy communication.
That's a great analogy. A skilled therapist can help couples and families identify their strengths and then work through those challenges and hopefully build stronger and more fulfilling relationships. But just like with individual therapy, it definitely requires commitment and active participation from everyone who's involved.
Wow, this has been so insightful. We've explored the science behind psychotherapy and then addressed some practical concerns like cost and even touched on couples and family therapy. I'm honestly feeling even more confident now in saying that therapy can be a truly transformative experience for anyone who's open to it.
Absolutely. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll leave you with some final thoughts and tips for those of you who might be considering taking that first step towards actually seeking therapy.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but my brain is like buzzing after that deep dive into the research on psychotherapy. It's pretty amazing how much science there is to back up its effectiveness.
It is incredible, right? And the evidence just keeps growing, showing just how impactful therapy can be for so many different issues.
Yeah, and I think we've done a good job of highlighting how it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. There are so many different types of therapy, each with their own like unique techniques and principles.
Exactly. It's not about finding the right therapy,
Yeah.
but finding the right fit for you.
So for someone listening who's maybe like on the fence about trying therapy, what would you say to them?
I would say be curious, be open-minded about it. Therapy can be a really powerful tool for personal growth and healing, but it definitely requires a certain level of, well, commitment and vulnerability.
It's not like a quick fix or anything. It's about investing in yourself and your own well-being.
Absolutely. It's about being active in understanding your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and learning those new ways to navigate life's challenges.
And you don't have to be in a crisis to seek therapy, right?
Mm.
Sometimes it's about preventative care, like going to the dentist for a checkup before you end up with a toothache.
That's a great analogy. Therapy can be such a valuable resource for anyone who wants to improve their mental and emotional well-being, whether you're dealing with something specific or just want to get to know yourself better and build your coping skills.
So if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or even just stuck, therapy might be something to look into.
I agree. And if the whole idea of therapy feels a bit daunting, just start small. Maybe try reading a self-help book or even listening to a podcast like this one, just to get a better understanding of all the different approaches that are out there.
Yeah. And speaking of resources, we
Yeah.
talked earlier about finding a therapist.
Yeah.
Are there any like specific tips that you'd recommend for someone who's ready to take that first step?
Definitely. First of all, don't be scared to ask for recommendations. Talk to your doctor, your friends, even family members. They might have some good suggestions. Online directories like Psychology Today can also be helpful.
And we can't forget about those online therapy platforms. Those are getting really popular these days.
That's right. Online therapy offers a lot of convenience and accessibility. But it's really important to do your research. Make sure you're choosing a reputable platform that only works with licensed therapists.
Okay, so let's say you found a potential therapist. What should you do next?
Just reach out and schedule a consultation. Most therapists will offer like a free 15-minute consultation. You can ask any questions you have and get a sense of their approach and their personality.
So it's like a mini interview.
Yeah.
Just to see if you click with the therapist,
Ah.
which is so important.
It is. Remember, therapy is a very collaborative process, and you have to feel safe and understood by your therapist, so trust your gut on that. If something feels off, it's totally okay to keep looking until you find the right fit.
And what about cost? If that's an issue, are there any options?
Yeah, definitely. We talked about sliding scale fees and community mental health centers. Investing in your mental health is priceless, but it doesn't have to break the bank.
Well, I think we've covered pretty much everything we can in this deep dive on psychotherapy. We defined what it is, explored different approaches, discussed all the research that proves it really works, and even gave you some tips for getting started. I feel like we've really taken away some of the mysteries surrounding therapy.
I agree. We went over some pretty complex concepts, busted some myths, and hopefully empowered our listeners to really put their mental well-being first.
And if there's one thing I really want our listeners to take away from this deep dive, it's that asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not weak to ask for help. It's about taking charge of your mental health and trying to live a happier and healthier life.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Therapy can be an incredible journey of self-discovery and growth. It's definitely a journey worth taking.
So if you're curious about therapy at all, don't hesitate to take that first step. You might be surprised at how much it can change your life.
And with that, it's been a pleasure exploring this amazing world of psychotherapy with you and all our listeners. Until next time, keep diving deep and remember to take care of your mental health.
Thanks for listening, everyone.